Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Joy at Home podcast. I'm so excited about today's episode because it's going to be a little bit off the cuff. You'll see what I mean when you meet today's guest. I promise you are absolutely going to fall in love with him and his family. I first met this man at the Iowa Homeschool Convention, not this past summer, but the summer before. And he was speaking and sharing about all the things within homeschool that are good and how those things are sometimes hard and how the hard things are the good things. And he just spoke to my heart with just such a sense of purpose and matter of factness, but also with an unparalleled sense of humor. Today's guest, his name is Todd Wilson, and he is a husband and a dad and a granddad. He's an author and a speaker. He's the founder of Familyman Ministries, and he's also the voice behind the Smiling Homeschooler podcast. I cannot wait for you to get to meet this guy. Welcome to the podcast, Todd.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Unparalleled. I like that word.
Between your speaking and your writing, we're going to talk a little bit about your book today. I picked up this book of yours, How to Be a Great Wife, Even Though You Homeschool, which is what we're going to be talking about in the title of today's
Sounds
podcast
great.
episode. And I am not kidding you. Like, I'm laughing every 30 seconds. And it's like, somehow, you just get homeschool moms and homeschool families, and you keep everything so lighthearted, yet so practical and applicable. And I love that about you. Have you always been like that with this great sense of humor?
I don't even think I am funny. People say that all the time. I think what sounds funny is that maybe I don't have any filters. I don't know. Maybe I just say what everybody else is feeling, and somehow that sounds funny. And honestly, it doesn't sound funny to me. It just sounds like the truth. And I think that we could have so much more fun as we do this journey if we not pretend that it's all easy, but if we just acknowledge that it's hard and that it's hard for you, it's hard for me, it's hard for everybody. It's easy to write a book on how to be a great wife or how to be a great husband, but it's hard to be a great wife. It's hard to be a good husband. And especially when you homeschool.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that hits home. I feel that so deeply. Let's talk about your family and homeschooling. How did you guys get started with homeschooling? And I know you have a handful of kids. I'm not sure how many grandkids at this point. Has everyone just always homeschooled? Were you homeschooled, or like how did that even come to be?
No, I was not homeschooled. I was a product of the public school. So I'm not putting all the credit on them, but that's how I learned. My wife went to Christian school, and we started having kids. And really, our plan was we'll put them in a public school, and then we'll be salt and light to our community. We'll win our community to Christ, and we were very intentional in our neighborhood. But then, as my kids got to about 2 or 3 years of age, I noticed that the neighbor kids were starting to ask questions that should never be asked by anybody, let alone by a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. And I thought, there's no way I'm putting my kids in school with them, because what I found, even when I went to a public school, is that there wasn't any salt and light. You really just hunkered down, and you tried to keep your head low. And really, the Bible's pretty clear that if the salt loses its saltiness, it's not good for anything. And
Mhm.
so I was really scared. I was scared. I'm like, I told my wife, I said, I don't want my kids in there, because they'll lose their saltiness. They won't be any good for anything. And if we think that we can put them in there for 8 hours a day and think it's going to turn out okay, we're wrong. And we had my sister-in-law, she was homeschooling, and I told my wife, I said, "What do you think about homeschooling our kids?" And she's like, "No, I don't want to do it." She goes, "I don't think I have the personality for it. I don't think I can do it." And I'm like, "How about we try it? And worst case, if it gets too hard, we'll take out a big loan or something and put them in Christian school."
Yeah.
And honestly, it's been the greatest thing we've ever done. In fact, I remember was talking to a mom one time, and she said her kids were like 30, and she said, we made so many mistakes in our parenting journey, things I wish I could do over. But she said choosing to home educate our children was not was not one of those mistakes that we regret. It was the one thing we did right. And I would really agree with that. And there are not many things I'd say, oh, yeah, follow my example because I'm great at this. But I would say homeschooling defined who we are and changed my kids' life. It allowed us to pour into them without worrying about all the garbage that was doing the exact opposite. And so we've been doing it ever since. We have 8 children. We're on our last two in homeschooling. They are all amazing kids. And I will attribute that to not only God's grace, of course, but that we had them at home the whole time.
Yeah.
And they became best friends, and they're still best friends. They're our best friends. And this family that we've created is a powerful force. I mean, we have people, our family goes to McDonald's, and this is a long answer, I guess. My family goes to McDonald's every Saturday afternoon. Everybody. I mean, it's not like we make them because we don't make them. They just like being there. And so we all go, and all 9 grandkids, everybody, it's super loud. And we have made inroads. And maybe this is going to be a book someday. I don't know. The power of evangelism just through your family, because they see you and it looks so different than the rest of the world. And it looks so enticing that people just come up to us, and we have these relationships that they text my wife now, and they're like, they're asking for prayer requests, and they're barely Christians, if, new Christians maybe, and they just see something in us that they want. And again, it's ugly. I mean, we're mean to each other. Usually in McDonald's, we're mean to each other. But there's something that they see that is salt and light.
Oh my goodness, Todd. I love everything you shared. I love that you share the good, bad, and the ugly because same. Like our family of 5 can be out and about, and sometimes we're mean to each other too, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling like a failure of a mom in those moments. But just like you shared, I remember being in a restaurant on a trip last summer. I torture my family. I make them wear matching t-shirts when we go on family vacations. And so we all had our little dorky matching t-shirts on. And our waitress just like she noticed and she asked us to pray for her right there in the restaurant. She
Hmm.
said, I can just tell there's something different about your family. And so that really resonates, just being able to disciple our kids and spend that time with them. I also am the product of public school. So I've been there, done that, seen that. And my kids started in public school. We're in our 3rd year of
Hmm.
homeschooling now. And it was one of those things that I was like, I couldn't possibly homeschool. It was never on my radar. Sent the kids to public school, and little things started happening. And they started telling me things they were hearing and asking me about things that no elementary student, as you said,
Right.
should be talking about, thinking about, knowing about. My son had recorded an audio clip on the school bus of the language that these kids were using and being allowed to
Hmm.
use. And it was shocking. And I finally realized my middle child was actually asking me to pull him out in public school. And I finally realized,
Hmm.
like, it's honestly, it's not a good environment. And he wanted out of that environment, and he wanted to be an environment where he could flourish and thrive and really grow and learn and just get to be part of our family and grow in all those ways. And so every bit of that resonates very deeply. Oh my goodness. As a homeschool dad and a homeschool husband, I can only imagine that you have seen it all and heard it all. In fact, there's a very specific story that you shared at the homeschool convention about the turkey and your RV trip. I believe it was a turkey, right? Am I right about that?
It was right. You're right. Right.
Okay,
It's what I'll
so
be famous for, actually.
you're about to be famous because you have to share it
Mm.
with the listeners today. I would love to hear just one or two of your most memorable family experiences, and you definitely have to share that one because it's a good one.
Well, the thing about family experiences is that you think, I mean, we're just getting ready in a couple weeks. We're going to all go to Florida. We all go. I mean, everybody. Again, we don't make them. They just want to be there. In fact, my wife is like, "Can we tell them they don't all have to come?" I'm like, "We have, honey. We don't put any pressure. They just like to do it together because I guess we have for so long. But you know, the what I pray for is that we'll have no issues. The weather will be perfect. The RV will run great. Everything. But those, honestly, are not the things you remember for the rest of your lives. The things that you remember are when things break down and when you all plan to do this amazing thing and it rained and you are soaking wet and your shoes float away, because you can't keep them on your feet. And at the moment, it's miserable. Nobody's laughing. Nobody thinks it's funny. Nobody sees any good about this. But later on, you go, wow, that was amazing. We just love that. And you talk about it at Christmas time and everybody laughs and really, so those have been our experiences. And so our family, we travel around the country. Really, this kind of phase of our life is changing a little bit now. But we traveled around the country in an RV, all 10 of us. And we would be out in the RV for maybe up to 100 days in a row. And and we've been towed beyond number of times. We've had breakdowns. We've sat in uh diesel mechanic shops and they go, so when we get it done, where will you be? I'm like, in your shop, right here. We're not going away. We'll be here the whole time. Which, by the way, you get amazing service when you do that. When you
I
got
bet.
8 kids in their waiting room, they're like, hurry up, people. We got to get these people out of here. And so but when we started this, my wife and I, someone said, oh, you got to get an RV. So we did. We didn't know anything about it. My wife had never been camping, her idea of roughing it was you stayed in the Hyatt instead of the Hilton.
Yeah.
And so we got this old RV because we didn't have very much money. We didn't want to go into any debt. And so we got this old RV, we fixed it up and we hit the road. And it was really, just a magical time for a little while. And then we were driving down in Louisville, Kentucky, and we were driving along down the interstate, and it was just a beautiful blue sky day. We just spoken at this gorgeous church the night before that was huge, and we're driving down the interstate, and I'm thinking, God, you are so good to this dad. When all of a sudden the whole RV just goes boom, and it like I honestly, it sounded like the whole back had exploded and we're like shaking all over the place. And I pull over to the side and I see the truck had slammed into the back of us. And we, it was terrible. We had to be totaled out. We get home and someone from our church says, hey, we know someone who owns an RV. Maybe they'll loan it to you. And so about a week later, this ancient RV pulls into our driveway and it's old and if anybody offers you that, don't take it, by the way. And so we're driving out to the East Coast and we're along the top of Indiana, top of Ohio, and we decide we're going to stop and see some friends we hadn't seen in a long time. And we pull in their big long driveway and I turn off the RV and my wife gets out to hug her friend and I thought, I had to move the RV a little bit closer. And I went to turn this key on this RV that has been loaned to us and it didn't start. It didn't make any noise. It didn't do anything. I'm like, wow, it's never done that before. And then I turn the key again and all of a sudden I hear this and it sounds like a flame started. And I'm like, that's because the RV was now on fire. And so it's just sparking and flames are shooting out and I'm screaming, the RV is on fire. And we find this fire extinguisher, we put it out and we disconnect everything. We made it out to the East Coast. We went back home. We gave it back to the people who loaned it to us. And the next year we started all over. Now I'm getting to the turkey part. And so we were out in the spring and we were going across the top of Indiana, top of Ohio, same path where the RV caught on fire. We had a freak snowstorm the night before. I mean, these snowflakes were falling the size of a saucer and they were just floating down. And we were watching inside our RV, we were watching on our television, Little House on the Prairie. And
Aw.
it was one of those magical moments. And the next day, we had about 6 or 7 inches of snow. The snow all melts the next morning and the sun is shining and we're driving out there. And as we're driving, it was just a blue sky day. And I'm, again, just kind of overwhelmed by God's goodness. And like, God, you're just so good to this dad. When out of the corner of my eye, I see this wild turkey standing on the side of the road. And we see a lot of turkeys now. We didn't at the time. And I was about ready to say, oh, look, a turkey. When all I got out was, oh, look, and the thing launches off the ground and goes wham right through our windshield as though it's no longer outside, but now it's inside the RV and it's not dead. In fact, It was super terrifying. And it was like everything was moving in slow motion. I could see, the window was flapping in slow motion. The turkey was all in slow motion. My wife was screaming in slow motion. The kids were screaming. There was glass flying through the air. I could see it. And we couldn't stop because we just gotten on one of those long bridges where you can see the trees down below you. And we're going across. I finally get to the other side, and I stop the RV, and I'm trying to corral this turkey out of the RV, and he lands, and I'm sure he never flew again. But so a tow truck had to come and get us, and we have a trailer, so another tow truck had to come and get a trailer, and then we had another vehicle that had to come and get all our kids because we have so many people, and so we got three vehicles, and I'm sitting next to the tow truck driver, and I have two of my boys sitting next to me, and he's just a good old boy, and we're bouncing down the highway, and at one point he looks over at one of my sons. He goes, "You guys ever ride in a tow truck before?" And one of my sons said, "Yeah, earlier this week." And
Oh my goodness.
because that's just kind of the way our life is.
Oh
And
man.
we've told that story so many times, and it has become the thing that, I mean, even when I start to tell the story, my kids can fill it in word for word. They just know it so well. But at the time, it seemed like the worst thing that could have ever happened to us. But it is the one of those memories that, again, I'll always be remembered for. They might carve a turkey in my tombstone. I don't know. And homeschooling is kind of like that. You think that this is so difficult. And, I was over at Facebook just a couple minutes ago, and, the moms are all saying, "I just don't know what to do. I feel like everything I liked, I hate now. And we're just not accomplishing anything. And this is not working. I thought it was going to be great. And, this is, I just, parenting is the thing I'm struggling with right now. But I know how it's going to turn out. You're going to get to the end of your journey, which is going to be over before you know it. And you're going to think about those homeschooling days. You're going to think about those times you had, not just the good times, but even the bad times you're going to remember as good times. You're not going to remember the arguments you had. Somehow you're going to remember the time you just had together. And I don't think that's because we become delusional and, we lose our memories. I think because even now, when you're going through the hard times, those are the good times. We just can't see them very clearly. So, there are so many experiences that we've had as a family. And I love them all. The things, and people always ask, so what's your favorite place to visit? And my kids have been everywhere. They have seen every Civil War battlefield, Revolutionary War battlefields, presidential museums. The things that I will remember, and I think that things they will remember will not be those things. I don't think they'll remember the Grand Canyon. They might, I hope they do, since we spent a lot of money and effort to get there.
Yep.
But I think what we'll remember is those times of closeness when it rained and we were inside our RV and we were so hot we didn't think we could hardly stand it, And my phone's ringing. I'm gonna try to shut that off. And those times of closeness when when I was yelling at them to be quiet in their bunk beds and saying, "We got to go to bed. Come on." I think those are the things I'm going to remember forever. I think
Oh,
those are the things they will remember as well.
oh my goodness, Todd, you just brought peace to the heart of every homeschool mom that's listening today. Just affirming that it's hard, but that it's so good. And those
And
moments.
I'm not just trying to say, I'm not trying to blow smoke or snow or whatever you blow, bubbles. I just, it is the truth. It is the truth. You see it in old people. I forever and ever, I couldn't figure out why all these widows whose husbands died and they seemingly hated them their whole life. And then they talk about them like they're the greatest people ever. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I think maybe it's because not that they can't remember. I think maybe they were great to begin with and during that whole time. And yes, it was hard, but you don't remember the hard later on. And the hard is the good stuff. So,
Mhm.
and I know that's going to be the case with homeschooling.
So that's actually the perfect segue because I want to talk about marriage and I want to ask you some hard questions about
Okay.
being married to a homeschool mom. Because bless our husbands' hearts, it has to be hard. Marriage in itself is hard. homeschooling is hard, and you blend the two together, right? And it can be hard.
The
So
perfect
good.
storm.
Yes, a perfect storm. So
Yeah.
good, but sometimes hard. So, what do you think is the toughest part about being a homeschool dad? Like what drives you crazy? And you can come at it from the angle of being a homeschool dad or a homeschool husband, but what kind of like just really grinds your gears?
Well, I'll tell you that because I am so committed to homeschooling, I am the encourager of my wife, and she'll say that. I know for some husbands that they're not as committed. They're not really sure about that. But I'll tell you from a husband's viewpoint in general, I think sometimes we feel replaced. We
Mm,
feel replaced by homeschooling, because now all your efforts are thinking about curriculum and kids, and we even start to resent our own children,
mhm.
because they take up everything. We'll say, "Hey, could we go on a date?" And you're like, "I don't have time to go on a date." And now we're like, "Why not?" Or can we watch that? No, I can't right now because I got to do this. And you start to resent the I know, like, we don't have a dog anymore, but I started resenting my own dog because I'm like, we would walk in the door after an exhausting time, and my wife would go, "Oh, do you just need some loving? Let me scratch your belly." And I'm like, "What do I have to do? Like lay on my back and have you scratch my belly? Why don't you guys ever treat me like this?" And so you start disliking your dog, and I think the hard part is maybe a shift in focus. I have known, I'm even close to several dads who really all push their wives back out of homeschooling because they wanted more time,
Wow.
because they did not think they were getting a fair shake. And because wives will say, "This is so hard. What do you think I should do?" And, "I just don't think I can do it." And now you got a husband who's like, "Hey, we could get our lives back. Okay, just quit." And so I think it does put a lot of pressure on marriages. And honestly, I don't know if I included it in the book, but I remember years ago when I just was talking about this, I was contacted by a divorce lawyer from a big city. I think it was from New York or Chicago. And they called me, and it was obvious right away. It was a lady. She was not a Christian.
Mhm.
And I don't think she was a homeschooler. But she said, "Hey, I see that you've talked on this area." She said, "I'm just curious because a lot of my clients are coming to me as homeschoolers, and I don't know what the deal is."
Whoa.
And and honestly, it is a whoa response, actually. To her, she was surprised. Um, to me, I wish it was not true. I had a mom who came up to me and she said, "Hi, Mr. Wilson. I heard you talk." And she said, "I have 10 children." And she pointed them out. And I had seen them during the day because they were all like these kids that you would look at and you go, "That's what I want my kids to look like." They were polite. Nothing was sagging or pierced or covered.
Mhm.
And they were just like, "Wow, those are great kids." And she said, and she kind of whispered it. She said, "My husband just left us because he felt like numbered 11." Um, and what she was saying is my husband was not the priority. He did not feel like a priority, and he couldn't handle it anymore. And so those feel like extremes, but all extremes begin with a first step. And
Mhm.
so I just want to remind moms, and I want all moms to remind moms to love your husbands, to love your children, to love your homes. And, it sounds like it's in the Bible because it is. But I think we need to remind them of that because we forget. We even in homeschooling, we forget to love our children, and we're surrounded by our children because we think it's about math and we've got to do science and so, all these relationships, they need to be nurtured, and a husband and wife nurturing the relationship, that is the most important thing. And I say it all the time, but I think if you get your marriage right, you get homeschooling as a bonus,
Mhm.
because if you get homeschooling and you don't get marriage right, homeschooling really doesn't even matter anymore.
Mhm.
And so it just happens to be the harder part too. It's hard being married. It really is.
Wow, that is so eye-opening to hear you say that. And I'm so glad to hear that out of the mouth of a man because it's like I know I am so guilty of that. And I guarantee you, every mom listening to the podcast today is like, guilty. But what do we do different? How do we change it? Because I think that, I think we're wired to somewhat be a mama bear. And it's like when our kids are
Mhm.
little, it is so hard. It can be so hard to not want to just naturally put our kids first above everything else. Do you have any tips like for with you and your wife? What did you do to be really
Mhm.
intentional about putting your marriage first?
Oh, I'm not even gonna pretend that it was ever easy or that we did it, and so it was, you know, it's not that easy. It's not that simple. But I do think, I mean, honestly, and I'm gonna guess usually moms are listening to these podcasts, even ours, it's usually moms.
Mhm.
Moms, you got it made in the shade compared to husbands and how I mean, you can treat your husband like crud for most of his life and then go, "Hey babe, how you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, okay, whatever. Yeah, forget that, and he is totally and he's so easy, you know. So, I know moms think, "Oh, I've got to well, I can't just stop homeschooling my kids, can I? I can't just ignore them." Like you don't have to ignore them. You just have to give your husband a little. I had one husband, I thought it was really smart. He asked his wife, he said, "Could you just stop in the middle of your day and think about me for 5 minutes?" He goes, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to, write me anything. Just think about us, because I think he was thinking, you don't think about us anymore. I know just this last week, my wife on Thursday of last week, I came upstairs. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I came upstairs and my wife had been talking with another lady she had stopped in. And my wife was dressed up. I mean, really dressed up. And I go, "Wow, where are you going?" She goes, "On a date." And I said, "With who?" And she said, "With you." I said,
Oh.
"Really?" And so we went out to dinner. We spent the night somewhere else and we watched You've Got Mail on television, and it was so amazing. I mean, and we haven't done this, I mean, in years. This is
Oh.
not her pattern, but it only takes a little to to encourage your husband. It doesn't take a lot. I mean, I'll tell you, if you will just take one of those little, I'm looking around my desk, I've got about a billion pieces of paper, but I don't have a post-it note. But if you'll take a little post-it note and working so hard for us, I love you, me, and stick it on his steering wheel, he will come towards you.
Mm.
He will be more involved. You may not be able to tell it right away, but he will. We're wired that way. And so I think, you know, I would say, yes, your husband doesn't want you to quit homeschooling. He doesn't want you to ignore your children. He just wants to be at the top. When it comes down to it, when it's between you and your kids, he wants you to choose him. You
Mm.
know, if he has to say, when we go, "Where do you guys want to eat tonight?" And they go, "We want to go to Wendy's." And he goes, and he doesn't like Wendy's. If you'd say, "Where's Dad want to go?" And he'd say, "I don't know, I don't care." And he goes, "Oh, what do you want to go? How about we do this? This is your favorite." And I mean, if you did that, I'd feel so loved. Now, I will tell you this because we had our just this is one of those full disclosure things. On Thursday, so we had this amazing night. And when we both felt in love, it was awesome. Friday evening, I said something and made her mad, and it all turned ugly again. And she said, then on Saturday, she said, "I thought it would last longer." And
Oh.
that's where for husbands, we have to remind our wives of the truth. That's not why we do it. It doesn't last very long. Whether we're in a happy spot or a not happy spot, we are still married. We're still doing something really good and we love each other.
Mm.
We do love those special moments, but it doesn't last real long, but for your husband, as a tip, I would pick something really small. I would pick things, if he has an annoyance, of something, and I always tease about, when we get in the car, my wife always likes to tell me I'm driving too slow. or, and sometimes it feels annoying to me and it becomes a big deal in my head.
Yeah.
And, but when she doesn't say anything, I feel so much I feel good about her. Just like because it was no big deal. And so I think there are a lot of little things that add up to some big things. But I would just do that. And I use this illustration. I use it in the book. I've used it lots of times. I like to think of it as a plant. The plant. I plant. I used to be a landscaper, and I would plant flowers always the same way. I would stick my thumb in the bottom of the little cell of the annuals you get down at Lowe's or Menards, and I'd stick it in the bottom. I'd grab the plant by the stem and plop it in the ground until I had my landscape world rocked by a guy on PBS. This guy was a plant expert, and he said, "Now here's how you plant plants." He said, "You stick your thumb in the bottom, you grab the plant by the leaf, and then you plop it in the ground." And I was thinking, why would you grab by the leaf? And apparently he could read my mind because he said, "Now I know some of you are thinking, why would you grab it by the leaf?" And then he said this that just changed my life. He said, if you grab it by the leaf and you pull a leaf off, the plant still survives. If you grab it by the stem and you squeeze it too hard or you damage the stem, you kill the plant. In homeschooling, whether you do math or science correctly is a leaf. If you forget to do whatever, the state birds, that's a really tiny leaf. If you forget if you don't do sentence diagramming, that's not even a leaf. That's like a speck.
Totally agree.
That's nothing, actually. Just get rid of those anyway. But if you neglect your marriage, which is the stem, it affects everything else.
Mhm.
And so I just, if you could kind of focus there, and again, your husband doesn't need tons. He just needs a little. And I tell you, I will guarantee you, he will be more involved in your homeschool, more involved in your life, and more involved in your marriage,
Mhm.
just by little tiny things.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I would boil that down. I loved when you just said choose him. Like that's so simple.
Mm.
I mean, we can do that. Wives, we can do that. We can choose him, right? That was gold right there.
It sounds really simple.
Right, right. Yeah, but I think if you take
Yeah.
nothing else out of the podcast
Mhm.
today, choose him.
Mhm.
When it comes to your marriage
Mhm.
and being a great wife, even though you're a homeschooling mom, choose him. Okay, in your book,
Yeah.
you talk about some things that husbands love to hear from their wives. What are a couple of those things that you love to hear from your wife?
I I could rattle these off, actually, maybe a little too fast. I love to hear that I'm smart and that I'm strong and that I'm capable. You know, all the things that wives used to tell their husbands before they got married. You
Mm,
know, they were smart, they were handsome, they were brilliant, their character was sterling. And now, after you get married, all those things get thrown away, and so everything you ask, you go, "Can you go get a can of baked beans from the store?" And he goes and he gets cans of baked beans from the store and he brings them back. And lo and behold, they're Hawaiian baked beans with cayenne pepper. I don't know why they all put all the can. I mean, there's like 50 options, and you're like, why would you get that? We never get this. And you think, what he hears in his head is that I'm stupid. You think I'm
mm,
stupid because of course I didn't pick these on purpose, or, you know, and so we like to be smart, or we like to think you think we're good parents because,
mm.
oftentimes mom goes away for the night and dad lets the kids watch TV and then they get back and you go, you let them watch the what? I can't believe you let them watch that. Why would you let our kids watch that? Do you not even care about our kids? And again, maybe it doesn't even sound like that, but what he hears is, what kind of creep are you? Do you have any moral integrity at all? Or even just, and this is the most not mundane is not the right word, but base thing. When you grab your husband's arm and you go tell him his muscles are big, that's really all of it in a nutshell. We love that. We love that. I mean, I
Yes.
love it when my wife goes, oh, either you're handsome or again, they're all the same thing. You're smart. You did this so well. Sometimes we husbands, we haven't heard a compliment in forever.
Mm.
I mean, and honestly, everybody else in the world might compliment us. The guys at work all think we're smart, and everybody else just thinks we're all these good things. We don't even care. We love it when you tell us, I'm so glad I married you. But sometimes what we do instead, we take little shots, and it's like no big deal. I know it sounds so stupid, but you'll be at someone else's house and their husband made this table or whatever, and you're like, "Look at this, Bob. Look what her husband made." And then Bob can barely hold a hammer. And, everybody laughs, but Bob doesn't feel that way. I know one time I called my sister-in-law and or she called me and I answered the phone and her husband was putting up crown molding in the house. And I said, "How's it going?" She goes, "It looks terrible, Todd." And I said, "Oh, don't say that, Dawn." I said, "Tell him it looks amazing." And she goes, "I know, but the corners don't even come together. They look so crooked." I said, "Don't say that. Say, you know how much money you're saving us?" Because the truth is, nobody cares about your crown molding. God doesn't care about your crown molding. Your kids don't care about your crown molding. Nobody cares about it except you, you know? But when you tell your husband that he's amazing and he saved you money and thanks for doing it, man, he will love you for it. And it's a relationship. And so I think, when we say, "Oh, it's just this easy," it is this easy, but somehow in the midst of life, we kind of get discombobulated and we think, "Oh, God does care about my crown molding," when he doesn't. Or we even think we will and we won't. I mean, it doesn't take very long before you could care less anymore about those things. But a husband who is groomed and watered and petted. That is something special.
Oh my goodness. So good. Mic drop. We're done. That was just
Right, right, right.
that's amazing. I
Mm.
mean, seriously, this episode, ladies, we can just hit replay on again and again and again because the things that Todd has shared today have been so simple, maybe not always easy to implement, but so simple. And he was so shared so authentically and openly what we as wives and moms, I think, really needed to hear. Todd, where are all the places where listeners can find you and connect with you?
Well, you can find me in a lot of places. The Smiling Homeschooler is specifically for homeschooling moms. Where we do a podcast every Tuesday night on Facebook. It's also is turned into a podcast format. We do a weekly newsletter to lots and lots of moms. You can see us on Facebook, the Smiling Homeschooler, all that. The Smiling Homeschooler podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts. If you have a husband and he's interested in that kind of stuff, we send out a weekly email to dads. I
Mhm.
think it's the most powerful thing I do because it is not a thing telling dads what to be. It's just my stupid mistakes and and somehow dads identify with that, and they go, "Oh yeah, he's just like me."
Yeah.
And so so you could sign up your husband at the familymanweb.com. We have a podcast called The Family Man Show. And I think that, and we've got books and products that it can encourage you because that's what we want to do.
Yes. And yes, be sure to subscribe to Todd's newsletter. It is so encouraging. Oh my gosh. All summer long, I was reading through the newsletters and Todd was talking about like just slow down, hold on to summer, enjoy summer. And I was like, oh, it was speaking to my soul. And then all of his books are so great. My favorite thing about your books, Todd, is that they're short. Like you could seriously read them in an evening if you wanted to. And I deeply appreciate that because we got a lot on our plate as
I get it.
moms. The moms and wives, and you totally get it. So, How to Be a Great Wife, Even Though You Homeschool, make sure and pick up a copy of this book. Todd, I can't thank you enough for just taking out of your time. I know you're a busy guy, you're a husband and a dad, and you're on the road and you're speaking. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with the audience today.
I love doing it. I love doing it.
All right, friends, be sure and share this episode with friends of yours. I think it was so encouraging. And Todd just truly shared some gold today about how to help us be the best wife and mom that we could possibly be. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place.